When a teenager's name starts trending on Matchday and pundits begin to whisper about international debuts, you can feel the world tilt a little. What was once a private development in an academy gym becomes public property. Highlight reels, superlatives, transfer talk and sponsor interest. Max Dowman, 15 years old and suddenly a household name among certain circles, is living through that tilt. This story is not a denunciation of excitement, it is a plea for perspective. Talent is thrilling and should be celebrated, but celebration without structure can become pressure disguised as praise. Tonight we trace how that pressure accumulates, what the risks are, and how a measured humane response could turn today's headlines into tomorrow's long career instead of a cautionary tale. Excitement is natural and understandable. The first time a young player steps onto a pitch and holds his own against grown professionals, there is a collective jolt, a sense that something rare has arrived. Scouts lean forward, fans tweet in delight, and the narrative machine primes itself. The next superstar, the Wonder Kid, the player to fix a team's problems. Those words, Wonder Kid, prodigy, future England regular, travel light and fast. They reduce complex development to a single headline, and a headline becomes a contract, a sponsor deck, and a pressure to replicate magic rather than to master craft. The allure of instant stardom is powerful because it promises security and identity, but for a 15-year-old whose brain and life are still developing, it can be destabilizing. We need to understand why teenagers are particularly vulnerable to this pressure. Biologically and psychologically, adolescence is a period of heightened sensitivity to social evaluation. The parts of the brain that manage risk assessment and impulse control are still maturing, while the circuits that reward social approval burn brighter than at any other time. That means the applause registers deeper and the criticism cuts harder. Add to that the cultural intensity of modern sport. Social media provides instantaneous feedback loops where praise, ridicule, and speculation arrive in the same breath. For a young person, that flood of attention can warp decision-making. Choices that should be governed by long-term development suddenly become reactions to short-term visibility. This is not speculative theory. A pattern repeats across football history whenever talent is rushed into celebrity without parallel support systems. Sometimes the cause is injury, sometimes it is the corrosive effect of sudden wealth or the loss of normal daily routines that kept a young person grounded. Often there is a common structural misalignment, an economic incentive to monetize talent early, a media incentive to create a narrative, and a social environment that rewards instant results. When those forces converge, players can be pushed towards moves, deals, or exposure that look attractive in the moment but undermine long-term growth. So how should the adults around Max respond? The first priority is to preserve normality. School, exams, friendships beyond football. These are not distractions, they are foundations. Education provides identity buffers and a sense of self that is not solely hinged on sporting outcomes. A teenager who continues to attend classes, pursue hobbies, and experience life outside training has a larger emotional toolkit when inevitable dips in form come. Clubs must insist on maintained education pathways and make them convenient and meaningful. That might mean tailored timetables, online tutoring, or exam buffers, but it cannot be optional. Second, mental health support should be proactive and integrated into daily life. Therapy and sports psychology should not be a reactive, last resort intervention. They should be routine components of development. Sports psychologists teach emotional regulation, resilience skills, and techniques to manage attention, not to sterilize ambition, but to sustain it. When such support is normalized, young players learn habits that serve them across career peaks and troughs. That kind of preventative approach reduces crisis interventions and fosters consistency. Third, media and communication need strategic handling. Media training for teenagers is not merely about avoiding awkward interviews, it's about understanding narrative architecture. A player should control his story, not be controlled by the headlines. That means clubs carefully sequencing exposure, deciding when a player is ready for mainstream promotion and when to keep the focus local and developmental. It means resisting the urge to monetize every milestone with immediate sponsorship deals or overexposure on social feeds. Controlled, deliberate exposure empowers the player to engage when he is ready to handle scrutiny. Fourth, governance and contracts should be structured with vulnerability in mind. Minors require protections that go beyond mentorship platitudes. Contracts for under 18 should include clauses that protect education, limit aggressive commercialization, and guarantee independent legal and financial counsel before significant deals. Leagues and federations consider cooling off periods for minors making major decisions and standards for agent conduct that prioritize the player's long-term welfare over short-term gain. These changes are structural and will take time, but they are realistic and necessary. Woo! There is also a human architecture that makes a difference: mentorship by senior pros, family education, and community support. Senior players who actively mentor younger teammates teach tacit knowledge that no manual captures: how to travel, how to manage meal routines, how to navigate doorways into media rooms. Clubs can formalize and reward mentorship so that it becomes part of cultural DNA. Families, meanwhile, need to be supported with independent advice, legal, financial, and welfare-oriented, so they are not left negotiating complex deals under pressure. When families are empowered and informed, they act as the most effective firewall against opportunistic behavior. We must not ignore the economics that complicate good intentions. Football is a business where discovery of talent can mean huge financial windfalls for clubs, agents, and sponsors. That economic reality creates a push to monetize early. A highlight reel leads to sponsorship offers. A headline leads to a travel agent interest. A viral run in one game leads to transfer speculation. That pressure is real, and for some families the immediate financial uplift can be transformative. But we have to ask whether that uplift is compatible with the player's sporting future. Selling a teenager too soon can mean losing the developmental environment that nurtured him. Choosing quick gains over careful growth can limit playing time and stunt progression. Practical interventions address exactly that tension. For example, any proposed commercial or transfer deal for a minor should trigger a welfare assessment. What will this move mean for the player's education, social network, and mental health? What is the plan for playing time, coaching continuity, and living arrangements? Who will be the club-appointed welfare officer responsible for the player's holistic adjustment? These simple, targeted questions change decisions from market transactions to developmental choices. Media culture has its own reforms to pursue: sensational comparisons, calling a teenager the next global star, or a lazy shorthand that sells clicks but creates unhelpful expectations. Journalists and content creators can make a conscious shift, prioritize context, avoid hyperbolic comparisons, and include the voices of welfare professionals when reporting on minors. Fans can play a role too. Social platforms are full of good-intentioned excitement that borders on consumption. When supporters choose to amplify context and nuance instead of just virality, they change the feedback loop. Schools and local communities are powerful allies in this process. A young player who remains rooted in local life has exposure to ordinary challenges and a network that extends beyond football. Partnerships between clubs and schools can create supportive curriculums that adjust to training schedules while preserving academic standards. Community mentors outside the pitch, teachers, local business leaders, coaches from other sports, broaden a young person's identity and reduce the risk that football alone defines their worth. There are also policy levers worth pursuing. Federations and governing bodies could trial a cooling offer windows for under 18s, considering significant contracts or international transfers, mandated independent counselling for minors entering commercial partnerships, or stricter registration rules that prevent the immediate commercialization of youth players. Agent accreditation could be tightened with mandatory education and transparent fee structures, reducing the chance of families being misled or pressured into deals. An immediate practical playbook for the adults around Max might include a timeline agreed by player, family, and club that sets out playing time milestones, education targets, and a media exposure schedule. Weekly mental skills sessions embedded in training. A named independent welfare officer who conducts monthly family check-ins, mandatory independent legal and financial advice before any commercial or agent agreement, and a mentorship pairing with a trusted senior player who meets with Max weekly to discuss life beyond football. Small, measurable steps like these convert intention into action and give a teenager concrete scaffolding to grow. It is also important to imagine alternative narratives in public storytelling. Instead of always chasing meteoric rising tales, media can celebrate slow-burn success stories. The player who took 5 years to become indispensable, the academy that quietly produced consistent professionals, or the club that prioritized education alongside trophies. Those stories reshape public taste and reward patience. Over time, if audiences value longevity as much as lightning, the incentives of the market will follow. We should also plan for exit. Not every young player will follow the trajectory of a professional career that lasts decades, and the moment of leaving the pathway should not be framed as failure. Dignified transitions, scholarship opportunities, vocational training, or roles in community sport preserve dignity and equip young people for fulfilling lives beyond elite sport. Systems that treat exit as the end create needless damage. Systems that treat exit as a pivot are humane and pragmatic. International transfers add another layer of complexity. When a teenager moves, country, language, culture, and distance from family magnify vulnerability. Strong cross-border protocols are necessary. Host family vetting, joint oversight between exporting and importing federations, mandatory introduction to local welfare advisors, and guaranteed schooling arrangements are practical measures that reduce risk. Football is global, but that scale requires more, not less, attention to the small practicalities of daily life that sustain a young person. We must insist on proportionality. The pace and intensity of opportunity should be proportionate to the player's maturity and readiness, not to the market's appetite. Sponsors and clubs who are serious about long-term partnerships will accept delayed exposure if they understand the long-term value of an authentic, sustainable relationship. Brands that want to be seen as guardians rather than opportunists can find ways to invest in education and welfare rather than mere short-term visibility. At the center of all this is human responsibility. Max is not an abstract case study. He is a young person with friends, family, an education path, and a growing identity. The choices we make on his behalf are moral ones. When clubs, media, agents, families and fans agree, even implicitly, to slow down, to invest in human infrastructure, and to prioritize growth over fame, sport itself becomes healthier. The alternative is the familiar cycle, a meteoric rise, a season of noise, then a narrative of what went wrong. We can do better than that. This is not a call to dim excitement, but to calibrate it. Cheer loudly for the skill on display. Celebrate the beauty of a well-timed run or a clever pass. Share the highlight clips and let wonder spread. But pair the applause with structure. Keep education in place. Normalize daily mental skills work. Insist on measured media exposure. Require independent advice for commercial deals. And make mentorship a formal part of club life. Those moves do not dampen joy, they make it durable. If we get this right for Max Dowman, we get it right for countless others who will follow. The momentary thrill of discovering a young talent should be the start of a story that lasts decades. When adults choose long-term stewardship over short-term spectacle, the game gains more resilient heroes, richer stories, and a healthier future. That is the promise and the responsibility that rests with everyone involved, and that is why slowing down in this case is really the most courageous thing we can do.